comes to Dr. Engebretsen.
Oh, thanks.
I'm going to keep it short so that she can get her talk going, but she's a truly amazing individual.
Thank you.
One of the youngest liver transplant recipients at the time. I think you were 4 years old at the time.
I was first from Florida, so it was a long time ago.
Yeah, and fun fact, her husband actually is a transplant recipient as well from the very same position. She's from our inaugural class at HWCOM, and she's a fourth-year surgery resident at Mercer University School of Medicine, one of their affiliated hospitals, and she's interested in doing a fellowship in transplant surgery. So everybody, please welcome Dr. Engebretsen.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, of course. All right, so this is going to be a pretty informal talk. I do remember where I sat in almost these same seats and was trying to cram in lunch and learn something at the same time, so I won't take up too much of your time. I'm going to try and just touch on what I think is important to you, which is how to get into a residency, how to be successful in residency, and what are the big pitfalls that I don't want you to fall into as a resident. So I'm going to put this in kind of a personal context, so just try and stay with my flight of ideas here. So I was in the inaugural class, as I said. I'm currently a PGY4, a fourth-year resident in general surgery in the largest hospital you've never heard of. It's called Navicent Health. It's the second largest hospital in the state of Georgia. We do about 3,000 trauma admissions a year. Last month I was trauma chief. I discharged about 253 patients in a month, which breaks it down to about 8 discharges a day. That's just the people who are lucky enough to go home. So we're very, very busy. So one of my responsibilities as a chief resident is to make sure that we bring in good people, people who can contribute to the team, who can handle the stress of running a trauma code, really understand how to care for patients, and do it with professionalism. So the way I start looking at applications, and thankfully I've finished for this year, is I look at your personal statement. That's where I start, because it gives me into who are you? Why are you applying to my program? Why should I let you into our family? And do I really want to be next to you at 2 in the morning? You know, if the patient is crashing, can I count on you to be there mentally, physically, show up, see the patient, and do the right thing? So I'm going to flip to your personal statement, take a good hard look. Here's my first tip. Do not ever, ever, ever in your personal statement describe your future job to the person who's already doing your future job. So when I read, surgery is blah, 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 I roll my eyes. It's like, I know what surgery is. I've been doing it 100 hours a week for the last 4 years. Please don't tell me this is what surgery is. What I want to hear about is what are your experiences and how do those experiences make you a good candidate? I would much rather hear about how you did X, Y, or Z and what you learned from that. If you have some crazy story like your dad drove a cruise ship, well, that's really cool and interesting. Probably not going to go in your personal statement. I left that out. However, if on said cruise ship you became yellow and you went into liver failure and your parents had to go all over the country to figure out what was wrong with you, we're starting to get kind of interesting. If then you played a key role in increasing donor awareness throughout the country, you went to Congress, you did all these other things, even if you were a little taught and couldn't really say much, that's still interesting. That should go on your application. If you made it through life with a unibrow and chipmunk cheeks from your transplant medications, you don't have to tell me you have empathy and compassion. I can read that from your application. So I don't ever want to hear, I'm a tough worker. Prove it. I have empathy for patients. Prove it. Words are easy to say. Show me your actions. So I think that resilience is the single most important factor in an applicant. If I can read your personal statement and determine that you are resilient, and I mean truly resilient, you go immediately to the top of my list. Head and shoulders above everyone else. Because I can take someone who is, mediocre in the grades, middle of the pack. Everybody's smart if you get to medical school. And if you graduate medical school, middle of the pack is not bad. If you get to the middle of the pack, but you have tenacity, and you will keep coming. I'm going to knock you down, you're going to get back up again. Knock you down again, you come back again. Those are the people I want. Those are the people who are coachable. If you come in and you were first in your class and, man, you know everything, you are too cool for school, please don't apply to my program. But go somewhere else. I can't help you with that. I'm glad that you're smart, but you're not going to do well in a general surgery program, at least not where I am. So to me, this is the single most important factor. Now, resilience can be demonstrated in your essay and in your interview in many different forms. This can be just one example. This is what I would say physical resilience. This is a time when there's a wonderful man here, Dr. Starzl. He did my liver transplant. Came down here to Miami for a book signing. Had this wonderful idea that he thought he could take me off of medications. We tried it. I was enrolled in a clinical trial. Well, it didn't quite work. And I ended up in immune rejection and spent like a month in the hospital until I had the bright idea that we're going to try it again. Only this time it actually did work. And so I've been off my medications now for 18 years. The gentleman here on the left, however, his name was Bruce. He was not so lucky. He actually died from graft failure when he stopped taking his medications because people teased him about his chipmunk cheeks. So I can cite this example for two reasons. One, there's some medical/physical resilience, which I actually don't have control over. And then there's also empathy and compassion in terms of experiences with a friend. It doesn't always have to be about you. You can give other examples with other people as long as you can recognize those characteristics and convey them. You could talk about emotional resilience. My father actually was lost at sea the week before I started high school. You have to be very, very careful with this one, though, and I'm putting this up as a caution. I did not put this in my personal statement because I didn't want it to come off as a pity party. So make sure when you read your application that you have someone else read it too. And if they're crying for not good reasons, you need to think about it and start over. Or if you did something really weird, like I worked for Disney World and I was a tour guide, and you could probably see that now that you've met me for a few minutes. But that gives the interviewer something to talk about other than transplant. So I included that I worked for Disney. A side note, when I was doing my transplant rotation, I was the last one in my class to go. Nobody wanted to go after me. They're like, no, we're not following you. You go first, or you go last. So one of my colleagues, who's a really, really good friend of mine, went before me. She's like, oh, you're going to love Trina. You know, if there was a Disney princess who was a surgeon, that would be her. Like, please, dear God, don't tell that to my former or my future employer. Not how I want to be described. But anyway, so if you had a cool job, like you used to care for primates, which I actually used to do before medical school, that also can go on your application. Stands you out. People will remember you. Oh, she's that girl who worked for Disney, or she's that girl who took care of the orangutans, right? You know, besides just the girl with the liver transplant. You want to have other things that they can talk to you about. If you spent time overseas, I actually was just talking to someone about kind of the non-traditional pathway. I lived in Sydney for 3 years. I initially went to study abroad for just a semester in college and got a job offer I couldn't refuse. So I ended up working for the largest nonprofit for those affected by organ donation and transplant, and I stayed for 3 years. So I have a gap on my resume where it says, I wasn't here for 3 years, but I have a really good reason why, and I learned a lot about strategic planning and business and policy and things that now are helping me a lot with my sport position that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So it's okay to take a break, just make sure that you can talk about it in a meaningful way. When I came back from overseas, I took a job with the Organ Recovery Agency. For those of you who don't know what that is, you will shortly because I talk a lot about transplant. The Organ Recovery Agency is the intermediary between organ donation and transplant. They're the ones who go to any hospital in South Florida. They take care of the organ donor once they're pronounced brain dead. They do all their medical management until they're ready for the operating room. They facilitate all the placement of donor organs. And they maintain the lists needed for organ placement. So I started working for the Organ Recovery Agency. My job was kidney babysitting. So once the kidneys are out of the body, they were put on a cold perfusion pump, and yours truly would maintain them until they were ready for their new homes in the OR. And I'd wheel the little kidneys across the street and drop them off, and I felt like Santa Claus. I thought it was the best job in the world. So I did that for a few years while I got my master's degree, until I met this guy. His name is Ryan. He's actually here, giving the spoiler away. But when I met Ryan, I was completing my master's degree, and he came down. He lived up north, and all of a sudden he looks kind of yellow, really yellow. That photograph is not photoshopped. His bilirubin there is 30. If anybody is familiar with your Billy values yet, if not, you will be shortly. That's really, really, really high. Normal is like 1. And so he found out that he had progressive liver disease and that he would also need a transplant. And you can see over the next 6 months, he really kind of became emaciated. You can see the muscle wasting from chronic disease. Thankfully, he waited about 6 months after that, and then he got his liver transplant. doing very well, obviously. And then we got married. Yes, we got married on reality TV. No, I did not put that in my personal statement. So then you know where the story goes from here. I was admitted to FIU in the inaugural class. My class was very small compared to yours. We graduated 33. So we went through this whole process as a very tight-knit group, but we didn't have anybody ahead of us. So we just kind of floundered our way through and kind of figured it out as we went. We harassed Scarlett for funds to go to every conference we possibly could so that we could ask somebody who actually knew what they were doing, what we were supposed to do. And somehow it worked. Most of us matched to our first choice, myself included. I matched to my first choice for surgery residency. That's me passed out studying for step 1. Feel your pain. And the question I get asked most often kind of during all of this, whenever I talk to anybody, is, when did you want to have a family? You know, you took all this time before med school. I'm a little bit older. And so, you know, how do you know when the best time to do it is? The best time, I can tell you, in my humble opinion, my husband may have other opinions, you can ask him, is there's never a good time. There is never a good time. You just have to figure out what works for you and what your resources are and how you can handle it. I spoke with my doctors because obviously my medical history is a little more complicated, and they advised me that it was better in my case to be pregnant while in the classroom than in the wards exposed to all the different pathogens because they were very concerned about infection. So once they said that, I said, okay. So I actually had Anderson, who's there with the headphones on, in the middle of my 3rd year, actually beginning of my 3rd year here. So he obviously is doing well. One of my classmates got me the little onesie. My mom is an FIU med student. That's like my favorite photo. And he obviously has grown up. Little did I know we were actually making history, and he was the first baby born to 2 liver transplant recipients. I went on to graduate, no surprise there, and decided on a career in surgery. Poor Dr. O'Leary had to listen to me over and over and over again. Dr. O'Leary, I'm not sure if this is the right thing for me. I really want to have a family. I already have a kid. How am I going to do this? Surgery is a beatdown. This is crazy. Why am I doing this? And finally, he just looked me in the eye and he said, Trina, listen to your inner voice. Why do you keep fighting it? You know you want to go to surgery. Apply to surgery. So I bit the bullet, and I applied to surgery, and I work like a dog. But it works because my husband is amazing, and he is very supportive, and he does the doctor's appointments, and he takes them to school, and he makes the lunches, and he does the laundry. And I tell you this because you have to have a realistic expectation. If your partner is also in medical school and is also going to do surgery, you need a nanny. If they're going to do psychiatry or peds, you may need a nanny for a year or so. But it's doable. The trick is to know what your resources are and how to manage them. So I have a very fortunate problem that I have 2 competing things that I really love, and one is surgery and the other one is my family. And it's hard to have the constant guilt that you need to be in 2 places at once. So if you're truly a masochist and you want to do this, you can, but it's with my caution that you have to know what you're signing up for. In my 2nd year surgery residency, which for us is pretty much a non-operative year, hence why I have baby number 2 up there. So we had our 2nd son. He's now 19 months old. I didn't think he would tolerate sitting through this, so he's with grandma. But thankfully, he's done really well. And now we're just your average big crazy family. So where do we go from here? So I'm in the middle of applying to abdominal transplant fellowship. It's actually what brings me to town is I'm presenting a poster for the Society of Transplant Surgeons across town at their big winter symposium. And I'm in the middle of the interview process. Thankfully, I've not gotten any rejections yet, knock on wood. And I've had one firm solid, please come to us, fellowship offer so far. So interviews haven't really officially started, so I'm kind of holding out. I haven't accepted anything, but future is looking very good so far. That's me doing my first liver transplant. I'm first assisting. Normally they don't let the residents first assist because it's kind of like big crazy surgery with hundreds of needles, and it's just very complicated. It's the simplest way to put it. But I kind of begged and harassed them until they finally caved and realized I wasn't going to go away. So they actually said, fine, we'll let her do it. So I actually got 3 that month, so I did something right. All right, so now back to you. How can you be a resilient resident? What can you do in your residency to make sure that you stand out and you do things right? First and foremost, choose the right program for you. which means the right program for you is not the right program for your neighbor. It's not the right program for your best friend. You have to think about what it is you want in a program. What do I mean by that? Do you want an academic institution where research is going to get you a department chair job down the road? Do you not care about research whatsoever? You just want to take really good care of patients, and you want to go to a community program. For me, the number one thing, I need technical skills like beyond belief. So I went to a program that had twice the number of operative cases as required by the College of Surgeons. So we are busy. We operate a lot, but that's what I wanted. That's what I chose. I could have gone to another center that was slower, had more time for my family, but I'm not so sure I'd be a good transplant surgeon, and therefore I wouldn't meet my goal long term. The other thing I think about is, you need to also think about your support system. My husband was freshly post-transplant. I don't think moving to Seattle, where I would have no family support, didn't have the infrastructure, would have been a good idea. So I wanted to make sure that I stayed local enough that if there was a true emergency with either my husband or my son, my mom was 5.5 hours away and we could drive if we absolutely had to. So be prepared for your interviews. This is the big one, in my opinion. This is the biggest one. I hate to say it, but people make snap judgments about you. And I have heard horrible stories that aren't true everywhere, but I'll convey them to you anyway because they scared me when I was a med student and I heard it. I heard a program director from up north in the Northeast say how he had an applicant come in to interview, and they were in the bathroom. It was a female applicant, and the secretary was also in the bathroom. They noticed this applicant washed their hands, did like the basketball shot for the paper towel, and missed the garbage can, didn't pick it up. And the secretary went back to the program director and said, wow, they're sloppy, they're just sloppy. I don't think we can have this applicant. Can you imagine everything you've worked for your whole life, all the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into your application, only for them to dismiss it over a paper towel? Not good. So just remember, anytime you come into town for an interview, from the moment you arrive in that city, you are on a stage. People are watching you. People are seeing how you behave. That may be paranoia. I admit that, but you'll be safe that way. So make sure you are nice to everyone. Make sure that you don't do anything sloppy. Take the extra 5 minutes to comb your hair. Yes, I have people who did not brush their hair before their interview. And be courteous. Worst interview I ever had was an applicant came in and I said, okay, tell us about yourself. And I asked that because I want to see what's important to you. What do you think are the highlights of your application? I already know what's in it. I already read it. But that's not the point. The point is, what do you value? So he says to me, well, didn't you read my personal statement? Oh. I said, well, yeah, I did. But, exactly what I just said to you. And he goes, well, if you read it, then blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And all four of the chiefs in the room, we all looked at each other and we continued with the interview. But between all four of us, we have telepathy now. And it was there is no way in God's green earth you're coming to our facility. Period. Done. You can't act like that. You don't act like that. That is not appropriate in any way, shape, or form. If you dual apply, say you're kind of interested in ortho and you're not sure if you're going to match to ortho, or you're kind of interested in a directed plastics program, but you're not quite sure yet, so you want to apply gen surg and plastics or gen surg and ortho, be honest about it. We know that it's competitive to get into these fields, and we know that there are people who will dual apply for certain reasons. Do not lie. If you come into a general surgery program and say, oh, I am general surgery all the way, I'm 100% committed, I will be your guy or girl, pick me. If we then find out that you applied to orthopedic surgery, and trust me, we will, because everybody talks, you are then automatically blacklisted. Automatically. No questions. I don't care if you got a 270 on your step 1. You're out. And that's because we don't value your word anymore. You don't have integrity to us. And if I can't count on you to have integrity and professionalism, I can't count on you in the middle of the night. And I don't trust what you told me about the patient. And I don't want you in my program. So that's my advice. No matter what, do not lie. Be honest. Don't falsely market yourself. What do I mean by this? Don't pad your CV with a bunch of research if you have no interest in doing research long term. Because say you do get into that program, you get into, Harvard, and you're like, oh yeah, I ranked to this awesome program, I matched, I got my first choice. Guess what? Now they expect you to produce research. Why? Because that's what was on your CV. So don't falsely market yourself. Be sure that you're asking for what you really want and you can come through with. And if you have anything you've been kind of longitudinally working on, say you were an Eagle Scout, or say you did judo, or you were a black belt, anything that you've done to completion looks really good on your resume. Even if it was, many years ago you finished your Eagle Scout, somebody will ask you about that on your interviews. So if there's anything you've like almost finished, knock it off. Finish it all the way through and put that on your CV because those things count. And the most important thing, I think, is the handwritten thank you note. And I say that because when I just recently was putting my fellowship application together, I went to our secretary and asked her very nicely for some things that I needed. She opened my file, and there in the back of my file, I saw my handwritten thank you note from when I had applied 4 years earlier. They saved this stuff. And in some places, they even give you bonus points for it. And I know just amongst the chiefs, they go, hey, I got a letter from so-and-so. They like us. They're interested in us. They want to come back. Oh, they mentioned, we talked about X, Y, and Z in our note. Do not send a generic note. Please don't send a generic email. That's even worse. So send a note that documents something you guys talked about in your interview to that specific person, which means after you go to a program, you need to take notes about it. You got to write down what conversation you had with certain people because you won't remember when you're on your 12th interview and you've met 5 people at least at each interview. In my program, you interview with every attending in our staff department. That is like 12. Plus you get all 4 chiefs. So you're not going to remember what you discussed with each of the 16 of us on one single day. So, and it's one-on-one. They're not group interviews. So a few more things here. I talked a little bit about support system. This is especially key if you're thinking about family planning. You have to have a support system. The second thing would be plan way ahead. It is not a happy accident that I am presenting research for the big society meeting the month I'm applying to fellowship. That is completely on purpose. I built my schedule so that I have the lightest, most cushy rotation at the time that my applications went in, and my ABSITE, which is our big annual exam, was at the same time, and my research poster needed to be completed. So I planned that more than a year in advance. That's why this works. If you wait to the last minute, you don't think that long term, you're not going to help yourself and you can't get through all of it. It's just too much work. Learning from the losses, I think you'll just learn more as you get more clinical exposure. It's kind of hard to imagine when you haven't really been in the field yet about talking to a family member about things that have not gone well. One specific example that comes to mind is I had a 16-year-old who had been shot in the head by his brother, and I had to go in and tell mom that her kid was going to die and her other kid was going to go to jail. And so he came to me as a trauma tier 1 code transfer from an outside hospital with a hemoglobin of 3 and an INR of 16. I mean, that's like not compatible with life. But I tried to do the best I could with it. I resuscitated him to high heaven, and then eventually he was able to donate 7 organs. So for me, I consider that a win. But delivering bad news is really a hard skill that you only get with practice. So pay attention when you're on your rotations. If your attending is going to give bad news to a family, politely, discreetly, beforehand, ask if you can attend just to observe, because that's a skill that you really need help with. My attending did not join me to go tell mom that her 16-year-old was dying. So, and I was not even a chief then, by the way. Pay attention to your MS4 capstone. I put this up here because at the end, Dr. Obeso does such a great job of sitting everybody down and drilling it into your head how to run a code. And you will point to someone in the room and say, you, go get the backboard. You, go get 2 IVs. You, go get the crash cart. And you point to every single person in sequence. And you're like, oh my God, I can't believe we're doing this for the 12th time. Like, I just want to go home. I'm done. That will be so ingrained in your brain, and it will save your tail when you leave. And I can actually tell you that my first code was not in a hospital. My first code was actually at a family reunion where my husband's uncle passed in the middle of the night and had a cardiac arrest, and I got woken up early in the morning to say, help, uncle's not breathing. So then it kicks in, second nature. You, go get me the backboard. You, call 911. So this is really, really important. Really, really important for you to have ingrained in your head, so it's just second nature. And you can take the emotion out of it and just do what you were trained to do. As an intern, you'll have help. You'll just tell someone, hey, you call the chief, or, you'll be on your phone while someone else is running the code. Hey, get the chief. And there you have backup. But we don't always have that luxury. Once you have that nice little title of doctor after your name, they expect you to know something. I expect you to know something. So be sure that you can do that. Celebrate the wins. So I had a patient in the ER. This was maybe 5 months ago or so. A gentleman came in. He was talking. He had He had a large intracranial hemorrhage, but he was talking, he was appropriate, he was still protecting his airway. He kind of decompensated a little bit. We intubated him, and I went to check on him about an hour later, and I was in the room and I saw just a few beats of bradycardia. His heart rate was down to like the 40s for a couple of beats, and my like internal alarm bells went off. My spidey sense, I was like, this is not good. You know, we need to rescan him. And I called neurosurgery. I said, you need to come down and look at this guy. We just saw him. He's stable. He's fine, whatever. I said, no, I really think you need to come look at this guy. And we had a very long, heated argument and ended with, well, if you're so sure you're right, why don't you scan him again? I said, okay, I will. I scanned him again. 20 minutes later, he was in the OR for a decompressive cranie. So if you think you know what you're talking about, fight for your patient and celebrate the win, and that's totally appropriate. However, you got to do it with professionalism, and don't fight with the nurses. That is not a good idea. That will never help you. Don't ever do that. And I think this is my last 2 slides here. So get mentors, lots of them, lots and lots and lots of them. Mentors might come from people you don't expect to be mentors. There was one guy, one attending on the transplant rotation, who had a very long-standing reputation of the fact that he hated residents. He did not want residents. He liked operating. That's why he picked transplant surgery. And he wanted to do his cases and not let somebody else do it. He would not call residents when there were organ procurements. He would, avoid them kind of at all cost. So my first encounter with him, I was on my transplant rotation, and I was very excited to be there. And so I'm, ready to go. And he looks at me square in the eyes above his glasses, his loopes. He just says to me, if you think you are doing any part of this operation, you are sadly mistaken. And I looked at him and I said, well, sir, if you think you're getting rid of me, you're sadly mistaken. You are stuck with me the entire month, whether you like it or not. And then he let me sew the vein. So I think you just kind of have to stick up for yourself a little bit when you have the skills to back it up. That doesn't mean be arrogant just for the sake of being arrogant, but if you know you can do it, it's okay to stick up for yourself. By the end of the rotation, he was telling me where I absolutely had to go for fellowship, and he wrote me the most beautiful letter of recommendation I've ever laid my eyes on, and I wasn't even supposed to see it, but I did somehow, shouldn't say that, get to see it. So, and now he's texting me like the updates on where I should and should not accept. So you never really know where your mentors are going to come from, so just treat everyone with professionalism and truly try and get the most out of every rotation you go on. A few last things. People are not always going to remember what you said. They will remember how you made them feel. I know it's a very old saying. I'm not the genius that came up with this, but it's so true. And I really hope that everybody remembers that when they go out to the wards. I don't know what our breakdown is, clinical versus first and second years in here, but please remember that when you're on the wards. It's not just what you know. I hate to say it, but it is who you know, especially when you get to the higher tiers. So many of the interviews that I have gotten have been because somebody is someone I met at a meeting, at a conference that I've worked with before, either one capacity or another. I do a lot of work with the United Network for Organ Sharing, and so some of these contacts are from that. It's important to get involved and really do a good job in everything you do. So saying that, it's okay also to say no sometimes. Like, you can't say yes to everybody all the time. You won't have time for anything. So pick your projects carefully, pick your battles carefully, and the ones you accept with sincerity and do a really good job at them. Don't half-ass it. And then don't forget the handwritten thank you notes. Okay. And anything really is possible. You can do all this. You can accomplish everything you want to accomplish if you work hard enough. But it's a battle, and it's not easy. And if I told you, sure, go to surgery residency, have kids, and it'll be wonderful and joyous, and it doesn't matter that you don't have anybody you know for 1,500 miles, like, that would be a total lie. So just make sure that you really think things through, plan way ahead, and you can make it work. It's just going to require a lot of effort and an amazing spouse. That's the key. And do you want to say anything?
I was going to say the same stuff you said about the spouse.
In summary, he's awesome. Yes, we agree.
Just know that you're not in this fire. You need to let whether it's a long-term boyfriend, girlfriend, just know that you're not the only one in residency. If you're in residency, then your spouse, husband, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, are in it with you.
And to an extent, your kids, too. I mean, I hate to say it, but as an intern, you can't expect to have every holiday off. You can't expect to, always be at everything at their school. I've missed plenty of school events. But thankfully, my program, one of the reasons I picked it is it's pretty family friendly, especially for a surgery program. All of my colleagues in my year, we all have kids. So all I have to say is, oh, it's Anderson's birthday. Say, oh, no worry, I'll trade call with you. Don't worry about it. Or, the other day, my kid needs to go for an ultrasound. I have to go. And say, okay, we got you covered. As long as you think ahead and you're willing to reciprocate, you can make it work. But again, it depends on your program. The one program I went to, where at the interview the night before, I asked one of the residents, I said, oh, do any of the female residents have kids? She literally laughed out loud and said, no, they wouldn't do that. And immediately that program went off my list because I didn't want to be the only female with kids. That's just asking to be singled out. So I wrote them off. Other questions I frequently get, so I'm just go ahead and answer, is I've been asked, have you ever gotten any of the blacklisted questions on interviews? Yes, I have. I've gotten some very intentionally where I know is intentional and I'd already decided I didn't want to go there, so I kind of ruled it out anyway. And then I got one that was genuine and accidental, and the reason I know that is because I'm at that program now, and one of the attendings I'm with said, we're talking about kids or whatever, and I was talking about Anderson. He's like, oh, that's great, do you want any more? And then you can see the look on his face of sheer panic, like, oh my God, I just asked her if she's planning to have children. And so I was like, well, and I kind of brushed it off and said, for me, it's medically complicated, I'm not so sure yet, and just left it at that. Knowing him now, I know it was a complete slip-up. He's not malignant at all. I knew he didn't mean it that way, so I didn't take it into consideration when I was evaluating the programs. But you will get places that will ask you difficult questions. Sometimes they do it just to see how you respond. For me, I ask very challenging questions. If you ever interview, well, you won't interview with me because I'm leaving, so I can give you my secrets now. But so when I interview with you, I ask everyone to describe a time they were challenged and how did you handle it. And if you tell me that your biggest challenge, true answer, your biggest challenge was playing on the varsity lacrosse team when you were in middle school, it is a really pathetic answer. Please don't use that. I'm sure you can come up with something more challenging than, being so good you had to be moved up. I also, we always give everyone the opportunity to ask questions. Every person you interview with will ask you if you have any questions. It gets kind of redundant because they ask you that so frequently. Do come with a page-long list of questions to ask everybody. But my favorite question, and again, I'm giving you a freebie here, is if you had $1 million to invest in your program, how would you spend it? And the reason I love the question is twofold. One, it tells you what's wrong with the program without asking. And two, it gives you the priorities of the program. So there was one program I went to where every single person said they wish they had new laparoscopic equipment for the OR. I thought, dear God, what's wrong with their laparoscopic equipment in the OR? The second thought, the director there told me that he wished he had money to send the residents to conferences. So I knew automatically, if you want to travel, that's going to be a problem there. And they didn't have an in-house transplant program, so I knew immediately this was going to be an issue for me. So again, is it an absolute no? Did I rank them? Yes, but it's something you have to think of when you're thinking of budget and all these future planning that I was talking about. You have to accommodate for that. So that's just my little 2 cents about interview questions. But I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. I know I've talked a lot. Yeah.
So some of us are in your second year, and we're going to start rotations in March. I'm assuming that you did have experience with medical students in the OR.
Yes. Yes.
How can we make your life easier?
So, surgery is a little different than most other specialties. I say that because and it's not true everywhere. I'm going to give you the generalities and the stereotypes. But, when you're in internal medicine, you see the flock of people walking behind the attending, and they're all kind of silent, and, they go about their business, and that's it. In surgery, we're a little more extroverted, and we're a little more motivated. And when I do the orientation for all medical students, I say, own your patients. Like, I want you to know everything about your patients. I want you to look at their labs. Before you come to a case, I have, the password. If you're going to scrub into my OR, when you walk through the door, you need to know their name. You need to know why we're doing the surgery, what surgery we're doing, and you got to at least know the anatomy. If you don't know those, you're not coming into my OR. And I'm that blunt about it. And I tell them day one, and then all the med students are scared of me because they're like, I forgot why we're doing this lab chole. And so I'll kind of give them a little bit of leniency the first time, and then after that, I'm like, okay, you get out. Just giving you the heads up. But that's, I think, the most important and most helpful thing, because it's just really knowing what's going on with everybody and keeping your pockets stocked. So what can you have? You like the stuff to change dressings, scissors. If you are in trauma, please have trauma shears. That will make you a very, very good person. Also have your stethoscope on you because the chief never has their stethoscope on them. They'd be like, hey, you med student, can I borrow your stethoscope? Yes, great, you are awesome. Thank you. Just got a good evaluation. Also, I don't know if things have changed, so forgive me if this is different from when I was here, but when I was here, we did some time with private attendings, at Baptist or such, and then we did 6 weeks at Memorial with the Level 1 Trauma Center with Carrillo and crew. Is that still the same?
It's a little different right now.
Okay. Okay. So trauma, you'll kind of get your butt whooped a little bit because there are no residents and you will work a lot. I personally think that every med student should do it. And here's my reason why. How do you know whether or not you like something until you really try it? And that doesn't mean having banker's hours and say, oh, this is kind of cool. I could do this, from 8 to 5, Monday to Friday. Sure, we all could, but that's not how it really works. So if you want to know if it's really right for you or not, invest the time, do the hours, and see if you're miserable in the end. Because a lot of people say, I really liked surgery, I just hated the hours. And this off-the-record restriction does not exist. So if you think that, you're going to go into a cushy hour, 60-hour-a-week residency because that's what Frida says, you're wrong. So, just make sure that you are reasonable with your expectations and what it is that you want. And this is coming from somebody who's going to go into transplant and be on call the rest of their life. So just, be sure you know what you're signing up for. Yeah.
If you're interested in you will be applying, how would you introduce that during an interview?
I would just be honest about it and say, I have an interest in, with a caveat. If you're applying to psychiatry and surgery, I'm going to think you have some issues. If you're applying to orthopedics and surgery, I could see that, and you just have to say, I'm interested in surgery. I understand I may have to do a fellowship in the end to get where I want to go because I may not be able to directly match to a direct vascular program or something like that. So I'm willing to put in the time, but here's the key piece. But if I match to your program, I'm 100% committed. I'm not going to switch in my X number of year if a spot opens. Because me as the, now chief interviewing you, that's my thought. My thought is great. So as soon as a vascular plastics, whatever, insert specialty, ENT spot opens up, they're going to leave, and I'm going to be a resident short. And then I have to take somebody that I don't know who scrambled from a prelim spot, and it makes me very nervous, especially in a competitive program like ours. We could have, qualified people. Yeah. I have to say, I really didn't know how lucky I was coming from FIU until I got where I am now. And the reason I say that is because we had these one-on-one experiences with attendings, particularly in surgery. I know all my examples are surgery, that's what I know. Where, I knew how to sew, and driving a camera was like a piece of cake, and I could close wounds by myself, and I didn't need somebody to show me how to do a running subcuticular stitch. I knew all that before I got there. My medical students now, on the first day, I'm like, who knows how to tie a knot? And I'll get maybe 1 or 2 people put their hand up, and I just okay guys, this is how you tie knots. And if you don't know how to tie a knot, like a surgical knot, and I don't mean just an instrument tie, I mean a real tie, like a 2-hand tie or a 1-hand tie. If you don't know before you get to your surgery rotation, find a scrub tech, find a resident, find somebody, dear God, and learn how to do it before you get there. Because if you can't tie a knot, I can't let you sew. Because I'm not going to sit there and tie a knot for you every time you put a stitch in. I can let you close, and I can scrub out and do orders and whatever else if I know that you can stitch. But if you can't tie a knot, you're kind of useless to me in the OR. So make sure that you at least know that first. But we get really good preparation here. When I was on trauma, and I know things may have changed, we would write either 5 floor notes or 2 ICU notes every single morning. We changed all the dressings. We scrubbed 2 medical students for every case. I got a lot of really solid training before I went, and that has helped me immensely. So I think that, we're very lucky here. And if you don't have that exposure, talk to Dr. Rodriguez. I'm sure he'll get you in somebody to spend extra time with you to make sure you know what you're doing. Other questions? I know I've talked a lot. Yes. No, I did not. I did not at all. In fact, I kind of went kicking and screaming. I was gonna do emergency medicine, and I was actually on the EMRA, the big board, the national board. I had a spot on the national board my 3rd year, and I had a mentor who was phenomenal, I loved him, and I did all this emergency medicine stuff. I was president of the emergency medicine interest group. And I think what finally changed my mind was two things. First and foremost, I thought when my kids are older and grown, and I'm, however many years old, and my job is just my job anymore, I didn't have, the kids to think about, would I still like my job? And when I thought about emergency medicine, I just thought, I don't get the same satisfaction. Like, I need to see my patients get better. For me, it's like there's that, dopamine release, reward when you see your patient get better. You're like, yeah, I did that, They look good. I helped them out. And, you don't see that a lot of times. You do sometimes, but not a lot of times in the ER. You see a lot of the people who maybe don't need to be there. You see a lot of patients who are kind of frequent flyers, and it just gets very frustrating. I saw a lot of ER doctors making phone calls, trying to convince consultants to come in and see their patient. It just seemed like, in the end, I wasn't 100% sure that I would really be happy. Whereas surgery, I looked at, huge investment on the front end. You basically give up five years of your life where it's completely gone. All you do is eat, breathe, and sleep surgery. Eat when you can, sleep when you can, don't mess with the pancreas. 3 rules of surgery. So you invest these 5 years up front, but then after that, it does get better, and you do have a little more flexibility, and you kind of figure out your way and how to manage your life, and you have residents to do your work for you. So it gets better. So that was kind of my thinking and what ultimately swayed my mind, but absolutely not. I changed my mind very late. It was like my last rotation of my third year with surgery when I was like, okay, I need to get on the ball here and harass some people for some letters because I was a late changer. Other questions? Yeah.
How would you recommend we market ourselves at conferences outside of the schools?
Just, they're expecting you to come up to them. It's kind of like this unwritten rule is, the younger ones come up and say, hey, I'm interested, and they say, oh, great, nice to meet you, and then they forget your name. So how do you get them to remember your name? Well, you get involved in something they're interested in. So if you have the luxury of knowing ahead of time that certain people are going to be at conferences, like if you look at the program and you see, oh, this program is going to be there, look at their research. So when you go to talk to them, be like, oh, I saw you wrote this paper on X, Y, and Z, and then they get excited because you know who they are, and they read something, you read something about their stuff, and you seem kind of knowledgeable, maybe know what you're talking about, so then they're going to remember you. Also, this sounds kind of cheesy, but I think business cards with your photo on it are a good idea, because then when you go to meetings and conferences, they can remember, oh yeah, I remember her, and they'll remember your face. They may not remember your name, but they usually will remember your face and they recognize it. So that's another thing some people can do. Some people think that's crazy talk, whatever. But I think that helps. And just showing up, as much as you can. My letter from the doctor I was telling you about who hates residents, in the last couple lines of his letter, he talks all about my history and whatever. Yeah, I have a strong transplant tie. But the most valuable thing I saw in that letter is he said to me said about me that the most strong, I'm paraphrasing here, the strongest part of my application was my work ethic. And I think that's what everyone's letter should say. It shouldn't matter that, yes, I had this cool and different medical history, but that doesn't entitle me to anything. You still have to earn your spot. And I think that's how you get noticed. Showing up early, staying late, making sure you do a really good job, you work really hard, and people will take note of that. A lot of these transplant surgeons I met because I would scrub organ recoveries in my free time when I was an intern. How much free time do you have as an intern? Not a lot. But I would be there at 2 in the morning because I heard there was a procurement and I wanted another procurement. So I would show up. My poor husband, I'd be like, honey, I'm leaving you. Okay, and I'd be out the door and I would go to another case. But you know what? I scrubbed a case with Emory. Probably shouldn't use their name. I scrubbed a case with Emory a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, and I was then at a UNOS board meeting 2 weeks later, and I was walking out of a room, and this doctor says, hey, you. And I, yeah, do I know you? And I was like, I think so. And he goes, yeah, we scrubbed the surgery together 2 weeks ago. I was like, yeah, that's right. Nice to see you again. I go on about my business. I come back, and he's like, hey, I just want to let you know I spoke to my program director, and we want you to come to Emory and interview. I'd never met the guy before in my life. But I scrubbed a case with him. And it was on my own time because I wanted to, and I knew something about the surgery, and he made a couple comments during the surgery that I knew what I was doing, and I knew my way around, and he said, wow, you're going to be a real asset to whatever program you go to. You already know how to do the surgery. So, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. You shouldn't have to market yourself with your mouth. You should market yourself with your actions. Other questions? Yeah. Yes, I did. I say it like that because I'm not super into research. I did it to check the box to make sure that I would like meet all the standard criteria that applicants should have. And I think it's important to demonstrate you know how to do research. So I think it's important to have something on there, but I don't think you need to do a whole bunch of projects unless you're planning on going to an academic position. The asterisk I would put on that is if you're interested in pediatric surgery, you gotta have a lot of research. You have to. And you should also plan now in your life plan to add 2 years of research to your 5 years of general surgery residency. Because you will not get into pediatric surgery without 7 years, period. In addition to the fellowship. That's before you start fellowship. 2 years of research, 5 years of residency. You will not match without that. One of the most competitive residents I've seen, I mean, this girl's phenomenal. I would let her operate on me right now. She's only at 5. And she got turned down for pediatric surgery. But she matched to fetal surgery, the #1 program in the country. So she's going to do a fetal surgery fellowship, and then she's going to do her pediatric surgery fellowship. So it's just crazy competitive. It depends on the structure of your program that you're at. So when you apply to programs in your beginning of your 4th year, there's this program called FRIDA, which you guys will become very familiar with if you're not already, and it lists, you know, whether or not research is required in each program. And some, like Augusta, I think Augusta takes 4 or 5 in Georgia, and they make 2 out of their 4 or 5 go into research. So not everyone has to. In my program, you don't have to go into research. We just require that you do something before you graduate to prove, kind of like what I was saying, that you're competent and you can do it. So I did my one project, which I am very proud of. It's a really good project, but it's my one project, and I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore.
Do you still research as a resident?
Yeah, again, it depends on where you go. We have the luxury of doing basic science or clinical research. My project that I'm presenting tomorrow night on Miami Beach is about the use of hemodynamic transesophageal echo and the brain dead trauma donor. Basically what I did was I looked at the use of hemodynamic transesophageal echo, which I'm sure you probably haven't heard of that because it's pretty new. It's a transesophageal echo. We look at the heart and the structure of the heart, and we do that by a device called HTE, which is about the same width as an NG tube. It goes down the oropharynx into the esophagus, and we get views of the heart that way. And the advantage is you don't have to go through the chest wall, so if they have chest wall trauma or if they have large body habitus, that doesn't prevent you from using it. And then we use this device to look at patients' volume status and ascertain if they're euvolemic, hypovolemic, hypervolemic. And then with the local organ recovery agency, we guided their resuscitation efforts and their donor management. And in the paper I'm presenting, we had a 80% drop in our presser requirement for our patients, which is huge, which is why it's being presented.
Any more questions? I know that some of you need to go to class.
Yeah.
We have one. Yeah,
Sorry, I talked way too long. Go. Do well. Be smart. Thank you.